Last time, we talked about how to make things readable and understandable on the screen. Now to the input side of the. As much as mobiles intelligently, preemptively push information to your users, sometimes you simply must request or allow input. This is not the place where I'm going to talk about optimal form design, because form's the default we've grown up with on the web, and it's too often a mistake, a holdover from paper form days. We make users do the work of computers. On mobile, users expect their devices to be aware, intelligent, and connected. Combined with more difficult entry in these default typing and selection sorts of things, makes forms just bad. We need to reduce the number of inputs we ask for and be intelligent about those we do employ. Say you're building a store locator function as part of your tablet app. You don't ask users to type the location in, do you? Because the device already knows. I don't even put in search buttons for things like this. Not that I claim to have built this cool square wallet app I'm showing off. And at least for maps, most designers don't. When you open the feature, you just get a map. Even when you have to gather user input, like this hotel finder, where the user's locational context may be irrelevant. Think about the easiest and most natural way to do it with the input types we have available. Why ask for location by making people type when you can give them a map and let them scroll, zoom, or draw on it? Gesture input with direct feedback seems a lot more natural, quick, easy, and a lot less error prone than typing. When you do have forms, make them simple and as short as possible. Avoid asterisks or anything like that for optional or required fields by hiding the optional items under an appropriate label, or getting rid of them entirely. I'm not going to talk about every input type, though you should be even familiar with them before you start building a form. Let's review a few though. Text fields are going to be one of the most common, and the most commonly messed up. This is typical. The system only accepts numbers. It even says flight number, but the field is set to nothing in particular. It defaults to the normal keyboard, where it's easier to type letters, and you either enter the wrong information or have to manually switch to numeric entry every single time. Think of the principles of resilience design again. Don't make the user take extra actions. Default to the most likely information or mode. Whenever possible, make it impossible to enter incorrect or invalid information. Don't show errors. Don't ever punish the user, but find a way to help them and lead them to the next step. An error dialog should never happen, not just here, but pretty much anywhere in your system, as that's another thing for the user to dismiss, then they have to guess what part didn't work. Input types vary by platform and in non-linear ways. There's no such thing as one that is better than another. Lack of support for an input type will not cause an error, but simply fall back to the default method. So if you have an old or OS or an old web browser, setting input to phone won't break anything. You just won't get the snazzy input you expected. Especially on the web, you can also hack things nicely. The last line gives us a nice big phone number entry buttons, but with only numbers 0 to 9, not the pound and star. So by default, you get the left input when you want to say you want number, but you really want the one on the right usually, don't you? No funny characters and nice big easy to tap buttons. There are lots of these inputs. Email seems silly to many people I've talked about, but how many clicks to get to the @ key otherwise? We try to eliminate single extra clicks on screens from our design flow every time, right? Save up all the times the product owner says 3 clicks and they're gone, and although it's wrong, remind him he said clicks, not screens. A URL one also exists with things like slashes and .coms and so on. These are not just mobile, incidentally. Built-in field validation generally prevents input outside the allowed range of input even when there's a keyboard, so on a desktop computer. Proper input types are good for responsive web design, regardless of your final platforms. Inputs can even inform us. The FlightAware app on the left says flight number and partly has to say number because they don't restrict to that entry and aren't thinking of the real context. Something as simple as the validation code from Twitter is designed to have the numeric entry pad open while you see the message. The user will have no questions about whether that's a 0 or an O without explicit explanation. The entry pad communicates that, as well as technically restricting it from being entered wrong. Even when you allow or require typing, you do it intelligently. You think about what users know, care about, and will tolerate. This thing automatically detects location and populates it. Note here it's only got course location. We didn't use the centroid of the area and call it a street address. We used the data we have correctly within the constraints we know. We expect people to revise it, and that autocompletes with the Google Places API. There's lots of info out there on the internet. How can you use it, the info you have or can get, to make your users' lives easier? Especially in apps, you get to set whether autocomplete works, whether you spell check, what the enter key says and does, even whether the input is a sentence, so starts with a capital letter, or a title or name, so every word starts with a capital letter instead. These little micro-interactions really streamline the use and appearance of your app, and it will help keep your data clean and sensible. Don't blow them off as something you'll get to later, but specify them and get nitpicky when it comes to finding bugs before you launch. There are lots of other neat input types, and you need to know how they work, when to use them. Unfortunately, so many that would take a couple hours just to review them all, so I'll just tease you with these pictures. Know that most things can be customized, so don't settle for a date picker when you can have a date picker that only includes dates in the relevant ranges. Always ask if user input is needed at all. If it is, do they need it to type, or is some other control better? This bar at the bottom can be slid left to right to select the tip. Much cleaner and much faster for the user. Now I want to finish you off with a reminder that none of these steps are independent or precisely sequential. For example, should you allow users to make a selection inside the page, in a dialog, or in an entirely other page? Sometimes you have no choice, as the right item is a picker and those appear as a dialog of sorts anyway. Otherwise, you have to think very hard about how the user will interact with the information. Is a dialog going to take them out of the process more than a long page in line? What's too much scrolling from one page? Would it help if the user could type to narrow the results, like when they type the name in an address book? You'll recall I said at one point those boxes in the task flow diagram aren't pages, and this is the sort of thing I meant. That input box might include dialogues or even whole pages, each of which you have to design in some way. In the next segment, I'll talk about how we communicate those design decisions we make to the team and document them for the future.